We are rural women. We are strong. We're ambitious. We're leaders. And we inspire. Some of us are mothers and caregivers, partners, workers and community members, friends. And we don't do it alone. We seek community, connection, and representation of people like us. 100 Rural Women plants that seed. We aim to cultivate a community that empowers rural women and lifts one another up. Welcome to our Spotlight series, where we interview amazing women who are making a difference for rural communities across Minnesota, because we believe that women like you deserve a spotlight. Well, thank you so much for being with me today. Today we have Fawn with us, and she is one of our board members here at 100 Rural Women. I'm really excited to be featuring her today and to just kind of learn more about you, and for our community here to learn more about you too. So we're gonna just jump right in, and if you want to just tell us about yourself, your name, occupation, connection to rural America.
Yeah, so my name is Fawn Sampson. I work for the University of Minnesota Extension, so I'm an extension educator up in the Northeast region. So I am based out of the Grand Rapids office, mostly up north. I have a special interest in working with tribal nations, as I was born and raised on the Leech Lake Nation, which is up north here in Minnesota. And I don't want to say I've been living here my whole life, but I'm from here. There was a short, brief, 6 years that I didn't live in the north, where I lived in urban space, but I moved back and bought a house in 2021. So that, I guess, is my connection to rural America, is that I was born and raised in rural America, so mostly tribal lands. And then as I got older into my professional career, doing a lot more work within rural communities. So my work in extension is mostly with rural communities and organizations. And yeah, I think is that everything?
Yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit about maybe some like previous work you've done or your education?
Sure. So I have a master's in education from the University of Minnesota Duluth. I also have a bachelor's degree. My undergrad is from Bemidji State University. I double majored in American Indian Studies and Visual Arts, with an emphasis in jewelry and metals. I only emphasize in jewelry and metals because that's something that I have never really done before. But my real passion is I like taking pictures. Photography is a hobby, but mostly like charcoal drawings. I do a little bit of painting, a little bit of everything, I guess you could say. Me and my husband are both artists, so we team up a lot and do projects together. So those are some of my hobbies. I also have two little boys who keep me super busy. um, I also past work that I worked in, I've been working 40 hours a week my whole life, it feels like, ever since I was 18. So for the last 18, years, I've been working 40 hours a week. So hardworking mom. And I went to school full time, pretty much the whole time. I just recently graduated. It took me a while to get through my master's, after I moved away and then had kids, and then finally decided to wrap that up within the last year. So that was a huge accomplishment and made me feel so much better to get that off my back. But I have worked for Leech Lake Tribal College. Most of my professional work comes working within higher ed.
Mhm.
I also worked for the University of Minnesota Twin Cities for the Department of American Indian Studies for a couple of years. And then I worked for the University of Illinois at Chicago as uh, tour coordinator and an admissions counselor. I supervised 70 students there. That was one of my fun jobs.
Mhm.
So that was a lot of my urban life. But otherwise, I worked for many years for our gaming casinos, as I went to school. Is the most flexible schedule that I had. So um, that's pretty much, I would say, my working history. My
Yeah.
professional work started at the tribal college, where I ran their print shop, and I also was a STEM coordinator, where, retention coordinator. So I am not a science person. Or it's funny, I'm not a science person. I'm not like a math or economics, but I did a lot of work around economics in the last couple of years, which we actually won 3 different awards for, which is pretty awesome
Yeah.
on my current team. Yeah, I had the awards. I just got them in the mail yesterday when I checked my mail here at work. And so the professional organization through Extension, we won 3 different awards, 1 regional and 2 national awards for our work in Indian country. So building economic capacity in Indian country. So basically our work, there was a team of us, which are no longer with us. They went and found one retired, and then one moved a little bit closer to home because he was from Wisconsin. But there was a team of us 3 who kind of laid the groundwork for the work that we're going to continue to do in Extension. We really are pushing like Indigenous voices to the forefront of the work and making sure that we are taking a lot of care in how we communicate and kind of work within tribal communities. If you're familiar with the history of tribal communities, especially coming from the university and university systems, we're very extractive and we like to take things, we like to study things, and not a lot of give back. So my work has really been grounded in upholding like traditional values and making sure that we are reciprocating the learning experience, because we do learn a lot from our tribal communities. So that's kind of like the heart of my work right now. I just moved into this educator role, so I'm kind of switching gears. So I'll be able to do a lot more scholarship and creating leadership programming. I'm not 100% clear on what that looks like yet. I have some ideas that are floating around. So there's a lot of work that I want to do around Indigenous leadership, and I think I'm gonna have to create a lot of it because there's not a lot. If you look up like Indigenous as a really focus on economics and like capacity building in that way, and I mean, people don't go to school and be like, I'm gonna be a leader. You know what I mean? I'm gonna go to school to be a leader today.
Right.
I was just looking through old yearbooks and I came across one that said, I'm going to go to school to be a psychologist and get my master's degree. I was like, well, I accomplished my master's degree, but I'm not going to be a psychologist.
Right.
So I somehow just landed into this position that I currently am, working around leadership and civic engagement. But I think kind of changing how we view leadership, and I guess just everybody in rural, right? Because people are like, I don't want to be a leader. That means you're kind of in charge. But I really want to come back to like that personal and individual leadership and how we see ourselves within just even our own minds, but also within our family systems and our communities, and then just keep going broader that way. So I'm just blabbering on, but
Well, I love to hear it all. I want to actually ask a question. Sorry, I'm going off the questions here
Sure.
that I prepared you for. But you kind of you said something about how we see ourselves in our professional life versus family versus community. Do you feel like those views of yourself are different in each one of those areas?
I do. I really do. I mostly take a look at how I really try to pull from my experience and my journey and listening to others. So when you can have all of the feel of how you are as a person, you can really kind of hype yourself up, and you talk about you're standing in front of the mirror doing your superhero pose and saying, this is, I'm good, I'm beautiful, I'm awesome, I'm smart, right? And then you step out the door into the real world and you have all of these kind of these influences around you that make you kind of chip away at those things, right? So I really feel that our individual leadership really needs to start at home and within ourselves, and that's really taking care of inside first. And sometimes that's not an easy task for a lot of people, especially in marginalized communities. We have a lot on our shoulders taking care of each other. We don't ever necessarily get a chance. I would say take care of yourself or love yourself first before you love somebody else. I feel like sometimes that can be a privilege for most people, because like who gets a chance to just stop and think and be like, loving myself, where some people, you know, when they're younger, jump right into high school to taking care of brothers, sisters, aunties, uncles, cousins, families, and this family system, right? So really feeling how I feel as a person and community. So when I grew up, I would say like through high school, I really put community first, and making sure that I was always educating about where I come from, and breaking down stereotypes, and trying to share information in a positive way. And I didn't really know who I was until I went to college. And then I started learning a lot about our history, because they don't teach our history in high school or grade school. So I had to learn a lot of the dark history in college. And I just remember leaving my classrooms like in tears, and just like feeling so lost. And kind of I went through this transformation in college, and really figuring out who I was internally, and why I'm here right today, and learning a lot about myself and the history, and my ancestors and people. So yeah, I mean, that's a really long-winded answer, but
I appreciate it though. I think that there's just from what I've learned from all the rural women that we've talked to is
yeah.
is that that transition into adulthood is different for people in rural areas.
Mhm.
It just is, especially that piece you were talking about of taking care of family. And that does, I guess, not necessarily just rural, but also different um, like communities, different cultures,
Yeah,
different expectations of what home life looks like.
yeah.
And so, yeah, I just feel like it's such a
And I shared space
asset.
with
Yeah.
like urban communities too, and
Mhm.
because there's so many people in such a small space, that just feels like there's always people around, right? And when
Mhm.
you come into rural, like you really have to feel comfortable with being alone, or being isolated a lot of the times. And we learned that a lot through the pandemic, like how isolated we really are, right? And so community is being connected is such a huge part um of our rural spaces. And that's even when I think of my tribal communities, our tribal communities are really connected through community. And that's really the essence of who we are. And it's built into our value system too. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, oh, it's just such an asset to have you. Um,
Thank you.
uh, helping make other decisions for 100 Rural Women. And I want to ask, what drew you to the 100 Rural Women Board of Directors?
I can't even remember how I was approached. I don't know. There was this like weird, so I have imposter syndrome a lot. Um, I just kind of speak from my heart almost all the time. And I'm not afraid to just kind of like, challenge things or question things in a way that makes us think, rather than, I really try to stay away from shaming and blaming, because I think we've spent a lot of time in our worlds shaming and blaming each other. But I don't know how Teresa like found me, but she came and asked me, and I was like, yeah, I think this would be really awesome. Um, because the way that we view women in tribal communities too, and how we value our women in tribal communities, and how I feel as a woman, um, identifying as a woman, right, is really strong. And I think it was super important. So when I think of rural, there's a lot of tribal communities. So I thought that I could be a good voice to bring up that piece into 100 Rural Women.
Mhm.
Um, I don't remember how I got connected with Teresa. I don't. I have mom brain really bad. I mean, I just had a baby 4 months ago, and I feel like every day is just a big blur. But
Understandable.
yeah, yeah. But that's just kind of how and she's like, "You want to be on our board?" I was like, "Yeah, sure. That'll be
Yeah.
fun." We've never
Well,
been on a board before, but
you know, Teresa, she has a way of finding people and searching
yeah.
out and just knowing somebody who knows somebody. So,
Yeah, I've done a lot of like talks, and being an extension, and all the work that I've done a lot of like connecting, and I was a liaison previously, so I did a lot of like networking and things like that. So people who come to me in different forms, in different ways, saying like, oh, I seen you, do this talk, or you led this conversation, or you were here. And, in Indian country, being one of the very few people who are in professional spaces, I find myself in kind of that presence of people a lot. So,
Yeah.
which, is good. And yeah, so
Yeah.
I'll just leave
Well,
it at that.
if there are like recordings or any links to share for some of those talks that you've done, I would love to include those too. If you have to scour the internet, you don't have to do that. That's totally fine. Like, it's not that big of a deal. But I'd love to be able to, highlight your work in whatever way we can. But my next question for you is, who or what has been your biggest inspiration?
I always say that I'm not going to get emotional. I am such an emotional person. I don't know if it's the hormones, but it's like, don't ask me these questions because I might cry.
I cry.
Well, and I say I speak from the heart. I truly do. I mean,
Mhm.
I feel like most of Minnesota has seen tears come out of my eyes at some point. But I'm really passionate about, what I do, and I really hold like tribal communities to the forefront of my work at all times, because
Mhm.
that's where I came from, right? And I know what it was like growing up um, in a tribal community, and just the stereotypes and the racism and how I felt, and being like, that's not me, right? Trudging through this. So my biggest inspiration is just my communities, honestly.
Mhm.
I'm not gonna cry.
Okay.
And my grandparents, and
Mhm.
just my communities.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna cry. My family. um,
That's really special though, because that's where your work leads you, I think, is what you feel inspired by. And
mhm.
so your community led you back to the work that you really do, which is
Yeah. I mean, there was a point in time where I went away and I was like, I don't want to be in northern Minnesota anymore, right? But I
Mhm.
think that everybody needs to go away at some point and always come back, because I'm like, home will always be here, right?
Mhm.
I was young and in my 20s, and I was like just exploring and learning new things about the world around me. And nothing is more beautiful than home to me. Like, I
Mhm.
come home and I'm just like, this is where my family has been for hundreds of years, and this space. And there's so many different beautiful things about our culture and the people in our communities and how we take care of each other. It just really inspires me every day to keep going, because sometimes working in this professional realm is really hard mentally, um, very mentally hard, because you get pulled in so many directions. And sometimes people want you to be the answer for everything, right? And I've learned over time that I've been having to say, no, I don't know, or I can't be this person for you, because I don't have the answers to everything,
Mhm.
um, which some people do. I mean, you get random people, when I worked for the Department of American Indian Studies, we would get questions from all over the United States, because the emails would funnel right to me, and you got some really interesting things that people would ask you, and you're just like, I don't have the time of day to even like finish reading this email from you, right? They're like, I have, and I remember conversation, people like, I have pieces of cloth, that are like native. Can you tell me where it's from? And I'm like, let me just go into my Hall of Indians and like figure out which tribe it's from, right? Like,
Yeah.
these are like, this education is, I had to learn myself too. It just didn't come. Like, I spent
Mhm.
years in college and listening and reading and visiting with people. So it's like there are over 500, almost 600 registered tribes, federally recognized tribes. That's not to mention the non-recognized tribes, which means that there's over thousands of different cultures and languages, just within the United States, right? So it's like just thinking about the whole world in itself. So I think when I come back to rural America and I think of my small little community that I grew up in and how rich it is, um, I'm like, man, we have so much work to do to, you know, when I was a junior in high school, I was a girls' state citizen. So it's like I don't know what it is really,
Mhm.
but you get to go and pretend like you're the state of Minnesota and you all run for all these offices. So they teach you about like running for office and things like that. And I roomed with this girl, I can't even remember her name. She was a white woman, right? White girl, and from rural Minnesota, southern Minnesota. And she was like, "You're Native American?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And she's like, "Do you live in a teepee?" And I'm like, "No." And she's
Oh,
like, "Do you have running water and electricity on the reservation?" I'm like, "What? I am here." I'm here in this room with you. Yeah. Like, it didn't show up in my butt flaps, you know. I always I always joke about the butt flap because when you see the Indians in media, they always have like the loincloths and things like that. So I've spent most of my life answering questions like that. So
Mhm.
um yeah. Anyways,
Do
I
you
guess
feel like
go ahead.
with that, I mean, there's clearly an issue with people with lack of awareness, right? Do you feel like like what's something that could improve that? Is it just better education and understanding from young ages of like
Yeah. I
cultures?
feel, yeah, I mean, adults need to do better,
Mhm.
obviously. And we've learned that, especially through the last few years, in how well and alive racism is and identifying white privilege and what that actually means, right? Some
Mhm.
of these are real big trigger words for people because it's just not understanding what it is, right? Um, and I've had to spend my entire life trying not to be offended by everything that people say because I'm like, I want to be educated, right? I want people to learn and I want us to like get over this like, oh wow, you're Native American? Like, where are you from? Like, and it's just like sometimes it's either, wow, you're native, like bad stereotype. Otherwise, it's like a super exotic thing that people are like, oh my God, right? So at this point, I'm like, everybody has Google at the tip of their fingertips. And I think it's just being able to listen to people and accept stories and understand where we are at, right? I'm not the same person I was 20 years ago. I could say that I was really ignorant coming from rural Minnesota, and I've
Mhm.
learned a lot over the years. So there are some learning pains, growing pains throughout those years. But I think that if we work together to continue educating and lifting up voices, marginalized voices, I think there'll be a point, maybe not in my lifetime. I would love to see it in my lifetime happen, you know, um, be pushed to the forefront of the conversations most of the time. But um, yeah, I'm trying to make a better world for my kids and their peers. And so as an Indigenous person, we always think 7 generations ahead and
Mhm.
7 generations, you know, behind. So we're always thinking about how we can make the world a better place for the next 7 generations. So if you think of that timeline, that's a really long time, right?
Mhm.
Um, and that's just the core of who we are. And we hear that a lot when we're younger too. And it's built into our language, it's built into just everyday living. So if you think about how differently your life would be if you were to think about the next 7 generations, right? Um,
Right.
you become real selfless and a lot of giving, and you really learn to open up your heart. And sometimes that's not an easy task,
Mhm.
but um, you just gotta keep pushing through, I guess.
Yeah. Well, and that's something that oh, I wish that was more common, as we're seeing things like for me especially it's with the climate and taking care of the earth. I think um we don't it's not common practice for people to think 7 generations ahead. I mean, that's the first time I've heard 7 generations behind, 7 generations ahead, rather than just like think about future. um, and I really appreciate that. I think that that provides a certain perspective that uh, that could really change the way that people do
Right.
things.
'Cause if you're honoring those 7 generations that came before you, you're honoring those ancestors and those people who why you're here, right? Why you even exist today.
Mhm.
Um, and I didn't get to learn the hard stuff until college. So, at least the first 18, 19, 20 years of my life, I didn't really know anything about the history and
Mhm.
why America was here, right?
Mhm.
Um, so it's kind of a weird, I always talk about walking in between two worlds, and someday I would wish for that line to kind of be blurred more. And I think through my work and extension, I want to be able to blur that line
Mhm.
where we're just automatically bringing in tribal voices or marginalized communities and really thinking and bringing those extra chairs to the table instead of people bringing their own chairs, because I'm tired of carrying my own chair. Right.
There we go. Yes, exactly. Um, I mean, that's exhausting carrying your own chair all the time. And
Right.
that does lead me into my next question for you, which is about a time that you felt discouraged and how you pushed through that.
Oh man. I think mentally I'm discouraged a lot only in the professional world because um imposter syndrome is hard, it's heavy. I'm constantly feeling like I'm walking in a space that was not made for me, and always carrying my chair around, right? Carrying my chair around with me, my arms are tired.
Mhm.
So it's like every conversation, um I'm having to be like, hey, I'm over here, right? I'm over here. So I can't think of like one time, but there's a lot of moments like that. And I think most times it's exhausting where I'm like, can I just quit my job and just be an artist full time? Like, can I just, play in my garden that I'm growing and,
Mhm.
be an artist full time? I'd rather do that. Can you just pay me to exist?
That's
You
the secret. How do I get paid to
right?
exist?
How do I do that? Right. And I think what's really discouraging is that, like, walking in this professional world of academia, I'm starting to realize I didn't realize that I wasn't privileged, if that makes sense. Like growing up on the reservation, having my family and having my culture, I felt really privileged to be able to have access to that until I got to college and be like, wow, we couldn't even practice, ceremony in public until like after the 70s, right?
Mhm.
Women were able to vote before Native Americans were even considered citizens, when we
Mhm.
were the first people in this area, right? To
Mhm.
think that I wasn't a citizen, my grandparents weren't citizens at one point. That's just blows my mind. So think like this just comes in waves and moments. I think that's the hardest part about the work, and just how I overcome it is knowing that there is it's gonna get better because there's more people are listening. People are trying. I see that people are trying. Um, and it's not always going to be easy. And I always joke at work, I'm like, I'm volunteering myself as tribute because it's not a fun job. It's not fun to challenge or question because people get uncomfortable, and I'm like, I'm not here to make you uncomfortable, but I want us to be uncomfortable with our colonized practices and
Mhm.
how we set our way on just being white male all the time, right?
Mhm.
That's even for like women that have been marginalized too, right? And to have all of these things going against me, I didn't realize that until I started becoming a professional. And this is when I'm like, can I just quit life and just be an artist and do fun things? Like, this is not fun,
Mhm.
right? So it's a lot of mental discouragement in a lot of ways. But moments like when I get a lot of messages, sometimes randomly people will be in my social media or send me an email and say, you really changed my mind, or you changed my life, right? Like you saved my life. I've been told that many times
Mhm.
throughout the years. And I always say, like, don't try to change the world, try to change the world that you're in. If I can make one person think just differently or plant those seeds, I'm winning in my book, right? That's a win. And so how I overcome those moments is remembering that people are listening,
Mhm.
because those who have negative things to say are always the loudest, right? Um,
Right.
and there's been moments in my life where like I said, people just come to me and be like, that talk that you did, you said some really great things. And sometimes I go through this moment where I'm like talking and then I black out and I'm like, I don't even know what I said. I just teleported from the beginning to the end.
Mhm.
So I'm like, I hate hearing myself talk, but because I can kind of go on rants. I mean, I get really passionate about the work that I do, and I get really passionate about my viewpoints, and especially around leadership. And that's how I overcome those hardships, is knowing that I am in a place to make a difference.
Mm.
And how I shape that and how I do that is really going to lay the groundwork for others to come forward and walk alongside me, more or less.
Mm. Absolutely. Oh, well, I've only got so I have one last question for you, and that is if you could give a piece of advice to your former self, what would it be and why?
I would say explore, right? Like
Mhm.
just take those adventures before you feel like you need to have a house and a family and a home, right? Like I feel that being in rural America, we see a lot of the family structures and this is what we strive to have right away after high school, right? That
Mhm.
family, get married, and it's like all of these things all at once. Um, I tried that. That didn't work out for me. I just grew into a different human being. I didn't know who I was, right? Um,
Mhm.
and being able to leave and explore, like my education has taken me places that I never knew I would go. I have traveled to almost every state. There's a few that I haven't gone to. I've met so many amazing people in my journey. I've done like internships. I've done, lots of conferences. I've taken, yes trips where I'm like, yeah, I'll go. I don't know where I'm staying or what I'm doing, right? Like
Mhm.
travel,
Yeah.
um, see things that are not within your, radius of home. Because you really appreciate how small you really are. That sounds really weird, but it
No, but
makes
it's
me feel
true.
right. It makes you feel really insignificant. Like if you're to look up at the stars, wow, you feel really tiny. But like even where you are in the place of the world, it makes things less scary or less
Mhm.
pressuring because I'm like, okay, I'm only one tiny little human being in this grand scheme of things, and I can only do so much. Because when I was younger, I was like, I'm gonna change the world, right? And that's why I changed. I'm like, I'm gonna change my world because I'm gonna change the space that I'm in. Um, and I wish that I just continued traveling more early in my 20s, because I tried to I stayed close to home. I wanted to travel so much, and I did a lot of that in my late 20s and early 30s
Mhm.
before I had kids. And it was just those are my favorite memories. Like my husband and I, all we do is travel together, and he's my best friend, and we're excited to share that with our kids too. My son is only 4 and he's been to like almost 15 states. Like, I was like, you're not going to remember any of this, but it's fun,
Yeah.
right? This is fun.
And
So,
he's already sitting on the board of 100 Real Women.
yep. He's already in there. No.
So,
Yeah. Traveling would be the number one. And just don't get caught up in, I don't want to say don't get caught up in people, but like tying yourself to one space. I think I understand that people have there's like family businesses and there's a lot of farmers in rural America and things like that. But I wish that we people, especially like tribal communities, that I wish we just spent time away from home, um, working in higher education. I knew that Native students were going to go home. I could tell
mhm.
because of it's just who we are as our community, and we really miss home when we're gone.
Mhm.
Right? We really miss that closeness, and it's really hard to find a community in schools. I was a non-traditional student, so I didn't have the experience living in the dorms or being really connected um,
Mhm.
to a community or really doing like super fun college stuff because I was already trying to be an adult, like trying to be you know, I wanted to be mom and wife and have my own house and like do the job and working my life away, right? But I didn't have some of those privileges of having family to support me
Mhm.
financially or emotionally. Now that I'm educated, I still even feel more isolated, but it passes sometimes. Yeah, so
Mm. Well, thank you so, so much, Fawn. It was been such, I feel so lucky that I got to interview you. I want to be you when I grow up. Um, but I appreciate so, so much your time, and two, your thoughtfulness in this, and just everything that you've had to say. I feel like I pick one quote to highlight at the top of the, I don't know which one I'm gonna pick. But I'm so excited to share this and for the rest of our community to get to know you better too. So this has been so wonderful, such a pleasure. Thank you so much, Fawn.
thank you.